Valentine Omens, written by James Scott, read by Drew Grimm. Doug trudged through the grimy, half-melted snow on the forest trail, his pudgy face twisted into a sour look. Not one for physical effort, he usually dodged anything that required it, so even the short hike had him feeling miserable. The constant meowing of the cats in the cages he carried only made things worse. Muttering curses at the animals, he gave the cages a rough shake before heading toward his truck, parked by the water's edge in the forested park's lot. While loading the cats into the back of his pickup, he paused to watch an attractive jogger stretching before her morning run. Aside from making money, his greatest weakness was women. And despite being married, his infidelity knew no limits. He often cheated on his wife with anyone willing, and even with her own sister. Unable to resist, he struck up a casual conversation with the jogger, hoping to get her number. When the girl quickly flashed her wedding ring to show she wasn't interested, he still tried his luck, until she rolled her eyes and headed off down the trail. Doug lingered, staring after her in a creepy way, before finally heading back to his truck. Once inside, he fired up the engine and gunned it. Revving almost to full throttle, the noise caught the attention of a nearby family at a picnic bench, who shot him dirty looks as he peeled out and sped away from the park. Unfortunately for Doug, the family wasn't the only attention he had drawn. From the edge of the forest, a pair of narrowed green eyes watched him with disgust. Nibbler sat regally on a bare patch of ground, soaking up the sunlight, his black coat gleaming brilliantly as it absorbed the sun's rays. The pharaoh knew exactly what Doug was up to, and was determined to make him pay. Doug's destination was just a short drive from the park, and he arrived quickly, eager for the payout from his plan. Even though he had only caught 2 strays, the nearby Chinese restaurant had agreed to pay him $20 each. Pulling into the alley behind the shopping center, he parked his truck and stepped out to relieve himself behind the China Walk's dumpster. As he stood there, the sound of cages rattling in the truck made him chuckle.
"It's too late for you two,"
he mocked over his shoulder.
"Pretty soon you both will be in Kung Pao Kitty."
Doug planned to use the money to buy a vape pen for his wife's trashy sister in exchange for sexual favors. After zipping up his pants, he went to the bed of his truck to retrieve the cats he had trapped. To his surprise, the 2 cages were both open and empty. For a moment, he questioned whether he had remembered to latch them, as he looked around in confusion. Doug caught sight of the 2 cats scurrying down the alley, and he threw his hands up in frustration. There was no way that he was going to be able to catch up with them.
"What the fuck?"
he swore out loud. That's when he spotted the black cat, sitting on top of his truck, watching him intently.
"Where'd you come from? Did you let out your little friends, you piece of shit?"
Doug bitched at the cat. The feline narrowed its eyes as though it understood him. The cat was far too well groomed to be a stray, likely belonging to someone in the apartments behind the shopping center. He guessed it had wandered from home to dig through the dumpsters for fish. That inconvenient detail had never stopped him before. Just slip off the collar, and like magic, it's a stray.
"I can still make a couple bucks after all, maybe. Here, kitty kitty. You want me to take you inside to get some nice sushi?"
Doug made a lunge for the cat when he got close enough, But he was too slow, and the animal simply jumped back. Since it did not run, he continued to reach for it again, but the cat jumped off the roof of his truck and stood watching. Trying to contain his anger and frustration, he continued to try to coax the cat to him as he crept closer to the edge of the woods. Emboldened by the fact that the domesticated cat was not running from him, he was confident that he could get his hands on it if he was nice enough. Speaking in his nicest voice, he continued to call for it, even as it moved into the woods.
"Here, kitty. I won't hurt you. I'm a nice guy. I promise."
The cat never moved more than a few feet away and continued to watch as they went further down the path. After following it for a few more minutes, the task started to become too much like work, and he was about to give up when he suddenly heard someone else approaching. Doug quickly whipped around and stopped dead in his tracks, with his mouth wide open. Before him stood one of the most attractive Asian women he had ever seen. She was wearing a tracksuit that did very little to hide her shapely curves, and her hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail. On her hip was a fanny pack, and she had bags tied around her tennis shoes to keep them from getting muddy on her run. She smiled at him and waved as she approached.
"Did you lose your cat?"
the woman said sweetly. Doug looked around to see that the black cat had not left. It still sat nearby, watching them both curiously.
Yeah, he got out of my truck on the way back from the vet."
He quickly thought of a lie.
"Maybe I can help,"
she responded, and for the next few minutes, they both tried to call for the cat together as the animal continued to make its way down the trail. Doug couldn't have been happier as he tried to think of a clever way to flirt with the woman.
"So, do you come here to jog often?"
Doug said.
"Nah,"
the woman replied.
"I have never jogged before." "What?"
he asked, surprised.
"What are you doing out here then?"
A bug stung Doug on the neck, and he attempted to scratch the bite, but found it difficult to raise his arm or walk straight. The ground quickly rose up to meet him as he fell on his face and lost consciousness. Doug groggily opened his eyes and tried to grab his aching head. He started to panic when he realized that he was paralyzed. As he tried to wiggle his fingers and toes, he sighed in relief when they all seemed to work. Taking in his surroundings, he started to cry out in terror. Doug found himself strapped to a metal operating table so tightly that it was cutting off circulation to his limbs. The woman he had met in the forest was no longer dressed in jogging attire. Instead, she seemed to be prepping for surgery. As she slowly approached with a scalpel, Doug mustered all of his strength and tried to push against his restraints, hoping to make any sort of room to wiggle free, to snap them out of desperation. It was a useless effort. This woman was no amateur. When she sliced into his chest, her beautiful face beamed with pleasure, and her eyes twinkled with delight. Soon she would have another heart to add to her collection. Nibbler did not have to be within close proximity to know that justice had been served. The St. Valentine's Day surgeon would not fail in her task. For trapping and condemning his kind to death, Nibbler had led Doug to be snared by a predator much worse.